of some 11,000 to 15,000 in solar years. Wow. Now, back here into the Arcturus planetary systems as a spirit in form. No, here he was not trying even to inhabit a physical form here. It was here that Reagan would be working with this collective group of higher dimensional spirits in which inspire the artist as well as musicians. Now, Reagan enjoyed this so much. Now, this was truly a time in the Arcturus system of great arts and crafts as well as music for much of those in the Arcturus system and other variables of species who took great care to go there to be able to enjoy this richness. Now, in the next 4 lifetimes, he would go to the Pleiadian planetary systems. The first one, as a snake humanoid, standing at 9 foot tall. Interestingly here, it was exactly 9 foot tall. No pluses, no minuses. Unusual here. Now, he had this grayish green in color. Now, and his jawline was at 9 inches outward from his face. His eyes, a swirling bicolors of greenish yellow. A double closing eyelids, which would enable him and others like him to work in very harsh environments as well. Now, as a career here, now in these lives, Reagan would travel by a space-worthy ship that he had, and he had worked a long time to get this ship, and it was a very large ship, and he would travel with the pioneering groups to their destination, and would, with his own work crew that went with him, to construct the pioneers' main housing buildings, domes, and so forth, as well as this supply buildings and landing pad. Now, this was a very high-paying credit occupation. For many times the conditions were so much less than even thought to be desired, as well as customers who just had not really thought about it and not equated just how hard it really is to construct the original main town buildings, needing to provide safety as well as making sure they are of very high quality workmanship for long durability. Many beings in much less advanced civilizations do not understand, as well as even the really high-tech ones who have been it for so many eons even, that in both situations here, neither groups are able to understand the depth of the hardships in having high quality developing settlement on or in a what was a non-inhabited planet before they got there, or moon, or even some situation, an asteroid that could hold its own atmosphere. Some asteroids can. Now, the largest amounts of spirit beings' body in which they would inhibit in their life are lost unto death of that physical shell on which their inner spirit so needed to use to maneuver in that life. Now, this time is between the first 13 to 18 solar month cycles. Usually, and I'll explain deeper here, because usually from the time they get there to the 13-month cycle, they have enough supplies they brought with them to in emergencies to last if it's rationed out. However, a lot of them don't understand on the actual cycles of the planets, of weather systems, and how the solar affects it when they go there. And so this 13 can very easily stretch out to 18. be an area of time frame that many of the pioneers would die because they had not planned right, because they didn't understand the depth of what is needed and what has to be done when they arrive. Now, this is what set aside businesses like what Reagan had in that life, where he had a fully trained crew that were fully trained in the wilds and actual schooling for the construction of buildings from many materials that aren't always native to some planets but are native to other areas, as well as understanding how to fasten them into domes and even for building tunnels. Now, to enable the pioneering groups to use the service and get around that, what I talked about earlier, of that extreme hardship, which usually came between the first 13th to 18th solar month cycle. Now, most of the time, Reagan made sure the group put down at least 75% up front in credits before he would even let his crew know of a new customer. For he had a crew usually between 75 to 100 of his really, really highly trained workers. But he had other groups that went out with other different pioneering groups. But this here, I'm talking about his own specialty trained workers that would have to fit in his ship, as well as all the construction equipment they would need and the parts they would need for the construction equipment, all needed to fit inside this particular ship. Now, the pioneers, on the other hand, that were held to the contract to provide the transportation for their own materials, as well as the people, the women, the children, the men, animals, and if not animals, whatever, plants and so forth. And much of the blueprints and stuff, that they were planning for tunnels and for the buildings and domes and such. Well, most of Reagan's crew were snake humanoids. There was usually a dozen, maybe dozen and a half, sometimes 2 dozen, depending on the size of the job, of Draco humanoids. Now, here to better understand this picture, the Draco humanoids, which had much more of that Draco dragons, ancient bloodlines within their character of physical humanoid form, because most of them had this much tougher skin and scales and these brute strengths that they were known for. They did not tire easily, and the speed and the length of time that those old class Draco dragon humanoids were able to work in such extreme, harsh conditions, that is truly that of legends. Wow. Now, the next 2 lives, Reagan would be as a reptilian humanoid, standing at 8 foot 4 inches tall. His dark green, mid-sized scales, thicker than most humanoid reptilians here were known to have, though his jawline here, a full 18 inches long, a sharp double rows of teeth lined in his mouth. His eyes a dark green, almost black, yet soft for that of a reptilian humanoid, at least in the surroundings that he grew up in. Interestingly, a soft-colored eyes for a reptilian humanoid. Now, as Reagan grew, he would go into a career of a pilot of cargo ships. After nearly 800 solar year cycles, he landed a job in this unique career for transporting cargo for an adventure theater group. Now, this would keep Reagan busy until his retiring solar years at 1,730 in the first of those 2 lives, and 1,931 in his second. In the next life, on the Pleiadian planetary system, Reagan would be that of a non-humanoid being, though note here carefully that he would stand near 11 feet tall, a snake being, which had some DNA of reptilian, which showed up in the characteristics of the physical body he had. Now, here being that of nearly 11 feet in height, though having his body somewhat like a humanoid, it was the slight differences that put him in the science brackets of a non-humanoid being, because he had a 5-foot-long, very powerful tail behind him. Although he ran on his lower feet very powerful and pretty quickly, and did just about everything else while he's on his 2 lower legs. Now, he had arms that were quite adequate in length to do anything for the most part a humanoid could do. In some business careers, even better quality than the area humanoids could. However, it was the tail that put him in a different bracket. He would go on as a career, being this musician, having schooled in the arts of communication. Now, it was his hobby of tooling out the holes in different hardness stones and crystals to make instruments, which would carry his career a long time. Now, he didn't like the music sounds that were manufactured for some of the species in his area so much enjoyed, because he thought music truly needs to sound pure and harmonic in the settings of the environments around where the music was heard. Now, he wasn't being picky, he just knew what he enjoyed. And he spent most of that career making those natural instruments for a long list of clients who also enjoyed the music like he did. Reagan would then travel in those 7 lives to the Lyra system of planets. The first one would be that of a snake humanoid, standing at 9 feet 4 inches tall. He would spend much of his long childhood taking extra classes to learn the already then at the time frame here of the ancient mysteries of the schooling of the healing and its arts. Now, this field of study, most students would never last, because this extreme strictness and this extreme width of the studies they had to study, of different studies, of different studies, of different studies, from other species' ancient healing knowledge, that was not unusual here, to see a student drop out and go into other careers not nearly as intense in learning. Now, Reagan and a few others here would make it to that very rare level of a grand mastery healer. His healing shop, Natural Territory, would cover nearly 20 square miles. The front shop was nearly 50 acres in size, with 18 different heights for that grown building's roofs. Now, it was that first building that was set apart from a mastery level healer from the lesser levels of healers, those of which had very much education and lots of talents and were useful for aiding others to heal and so forth. It was only a grand mastery healer who had the knowledge and the strength to actually grow a living building out of energy, in which held this so many mysterious curved pathways, thousands of different types of herbs, orbs, crystals, ointments, oils, powders, plants, and more. All the natural setting of his near 20 square miles of natural territory